Hey everybody, welcome back to the My Mama Done Told Me intermission series. While we're on a short break before season 2, I am using this time to share some other creative work that I've been up to. Today I want to introduce to you a fairly new podcast that I co-host called So What, Who Cares? This show is something really special. I make it with my brilliant co-host, Lora McCarville. She's a teacher, a coach, a guide, and someone who helps people reconnect with themselves. She does it in a very grounded, compassionate way. So What, Who Cares explores practical insights for an impractical mind. I believe it has a really beautiful and accessible way of inviting people back to the truth about who they are. And we talk about things like nervous system regulation, self-sourcing, emotions, how to actually show up for your life even when life is messy. So today, we are sharing with you an episode of So What, Who Cares? Right here in the My Mama Done Told Me feed. If it hits you in the heart or the gut, go find us wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe and give it a listen. Here is So What, Who Cares? With me and Lora McCarville.
The ocean stretched endlessly around him, its surface shimmering under the pale light of dawn. He had been at sea for only a short time, but already the vastness of the journey had begun to settle into his bones. There was no turning back now, only forward, into the unknown. The adventurer reached into his backpack, searching for something to steady his thoughts. His fingers brushed against a familiar texture. Slowly, he pulled it out and held it up to the light. An old captain's hat. Worn and weathered, its edges frayed from years of use. He smiled. Had this always been in his backpack, all along? This wasn't just any piece of gear. This was a reminder of who he really is. Placing it on his head, he felt a shift. This hat wasn't magic, but it carried a weight that anchored him to his core. It was a symbol of who he was beneath the surface. Not just an adventurer, not just his mannerisms or his achievements or his failures or his experiences, but the captain of his own ship. A traveler who could source strength and direction from within. The wind picked up, the ocean sprayed over the side of his boat, the horizon beckoned, and with the captain's hat firmly on his head, he felt a little less alone, a little more sure. With renewed hope, he gripped both oars firmly and began to row. This is So What, Who Cares? With Jeff Kolaski and me, Lora McCarville. Join us as we explore practical insights for an impractical mind.
So Laura, when I first met you, we were doing a podcast, right? When I first met you in person. And one of the things that we discussed was something that you also said that you wanted to talk about today. Mm-hmm. And for our first episode. And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't sure that I truly understood what it meant. And I think that may still be true. So I think maybe let's start by diving into that. Self-sourcing.
Yeah.
Do you want to start there? Is that a good place to start? Okay. What is this?
Okay. So the reason I thought it was important to go into this is that when we look into the future episodes, we were talking emotions and mind and this and body and things that we can start listening to, falling into, and understanding. And sometimes maybe there's this thing of who we are that needs to be touched into first. So all of my one-on-one sessions, when I work with people, really we start with like, what is this thing that animates us? Now, some methods would maybe use the word soul. I use the word essence a lot. This sense of self, like capital S. In IFS, they would describe it as that place in which you find yourself curious and calm, creative, connected. They have like 8 C's they describe it as. Most of the time, I think that we recognize it when we're in nature. That moment of awe, like when time sort of goes like, whoa, that's who we are.
Yeah.
But what happens is we start to think we're our personality or our trauma or our emotional states. I'm just an angry person.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, is this sense of self.
Yeah. How do you help somebody find what that is? Are you looking to give that a name? Are you looking to give that or to I guess, how do you, because a lot of that may tie with like a certain religion or something like that, if that's something, or spirituality or something that someone believes in. Someone like myself who doesn't, you know, I could get behind really any word you want to use. If it's essence, if it's soul, to me, it doesn't really matter. But clearly there's a Jeff, and Jeff in a lot of ways is the body that's right here, but it's not all that. Because if I lose, you know, my hand or something, I'm still Jeff.
That's right.
You know, and
I don't say like, "Hey, nice of you to show up," but it'd been better if you brought your hand.
Right. Yeah.
I would
exactly.
say something like that because you're not your body.
Right. So there's something behind, you know, there's 4 animated characters behind the, you know, control panel in my brain, like in Inside Out. You know, that sort of idea that there's something that's collectively makes up Jeff. How do you find that?
So like in Inside Out, that was and they consulted IFS in that filming. So those emotional states, those primitive emotions, brilliant. Still, I'm asking when I'm working one-on-one with people, I might just say, let's just try on thinking like this. That from the moment you dropped into a body, and that body's different than it is today, there was this thing of who you are, the essence of who you are. And so you've had different emotions, feelings, sensations, but the thing of who you are has been with you from the beginning of time and will be with you to the end. And you might subscribe and think maybe come back again.
Why is it so important then to find that before you move on to other things, before we continue on whatever work we're doing? Why is it important to find that first? And are you asking that you understand it, that you know it, or are you just asking you acknowledge it?
Yeah, and maybe I'm just asking for some people to try it on and think like this for a little bit with me.
Okay.
And for some people, I would do a guided visualization of being in nature. So if you were in nature and you felt that sense of awe, nature's holding a mirror to you and saying, this is who you are. So connected, this is it. So some people have a visceral somatic response to awe and essence. But I think your question was like, why is that important?
Yeah.
And it's important because if we're doing curious inquiry work, if we're exploring this human condition, we do have to, or we benefit greatly if we have a sense of self to look at this stuff.
how far do you have to go into that? How does one answer that? And how do you know when it's time to, like, okay, now you understand, or is that just an ongoing work
I think
in
it's
progress?
ongoing.
Okay.
I think there's times in which, for myself, like I can feel, and I can look back at my life and look back at being little and being like, oh, I had a strong sense of like, I of my essence of myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessary. Not all children are tapping into that. Um, who knows why I did, but I did then. And so I can look back and see it easy. Not everyone can.
Mm-hmm.
It's a practice. That doesn't mean mine doesn't come and go.
Sure.
And if I refer to like my son who has a sensory thing and doesn't like being in nature, I'm not going to use that with him, right? How does he find his essence? Where does he find self? When we're younger, and I do want to say this is really important. When you're younger, self-sourcing isn't what you do. You really do turn to your food givers and your
Yeah.
community and you look at like, oh, is this me? Is that me? Oh, I'm like this, and you kind of emulate what's around. That's really developmentally normal.
Right.
When working with adults, then that becomes something else. It is beneficial for children to know like there is a thing of who you are, so that this emotion is floating through, and this thing observing the emotion, feeling it, sensing it,
Having to deal with it. Yeah.
right. Way different than when that state takes you over.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So as a child, then what is that then? So we talk about self-sourcing, kind of self-sourcing is more of just an acknowledgement of me.
yeah, or maybe even like an embodiment of you,
Okay.
like who you are, not your personality,
Right.
but like this thing of who you are,
Okay.
which we want that driving the bus of our life.
Okay.
We want that in the driver's seat more than we want that personality that we picked up, or that prolonged state of anger that we picked up. We want the sense of self leading.
So when you've come to a place where you understand sort of what you're working with somebody, or we, as just as in conversationally, you sort of understand that, or at least you feel like you have an understanding of that, where do you go from there? Because what's a child doing? Is that resourcing?
Well,
or is that a different?
I mean, yeah, and we resource too. Adults and children do a lot of resourcing and co-regulation, and we're
which
different than the self. We regulate, co-regulate, sort of. So I would say, then we could come back to the self, right? But how I work with children, and the reason I think this is important is a lot of times we go right into mindfulness, and like when I worked with kids, teaching mindfulness in big group settings, very quickly I was like, oh, this isn't working. For especially in like working with kids with a ton of trauma and living in poverty, like mindfulness is not what we pop into. We really have to start with something else. So I might use something like symbol, like choose a wild bird or a wild animal, right? And they might choose something really pleasant to work with, and we would go, oh, like a bunny, and what does it feel like to be like a bunny? And so very different to sort of feel into that. If I'm working one-on-one with a kiddo, then it's something similar, but probably a little bit more of education. Like there's this thing of who you are that's not your emotions. That's not the thing that happened to you. Right. And this thing that animates you. Now, what works for kids works for adults. So sometimes it's pick a wild bird, wild animal, mythical creature.
I could see connecting with that.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So when you found that, I guess, so is that the same as finding, you mentioned the word essence. You find that, right? What do you do with it?
Put it in a jar. No, I don't know.
Throw it away.
And done.
Yeah.
No, what we do is we practice coming back to it, to
Okay.
letting it lead our life, right? So
Okay.
if I work with like a strong primary emotion of fear, and fear is leading my life, that's not my essence. So the more the work I do in meditations, in certain guided meditations, not all, the more we can practice coming into a sense of self. Sometimes it's just saying your name. I have different things to do. Push on a wall, say your name out loud. While you're feeling your body, say your age. Like, I'm Lora, I'm 48. And the part of me that's really afraid is like, what? You're 48?
Yeah.
And I can start to feel like, oh, wow. Okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here. And that then...
So then you feel like then that gives you or people or us does it allow you to sort of step out of the stuff and see, okay, this is just something I'm dealing with. This is just a pain that I'm feeling. This is just a way that I'm behaving. This is just whatever. But it's not necessarily me.
Right.
And is that just reframing? Well, not just. Is that reframing a person's idea of what it means to be me?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe what it means to be you, and how you work with then the stuff.
Okay. Because we're not able to then, because now is when the real work starts, correct? I
have a hard time saying like that's when the real work starts, because it's all real work.
Yeah.
It's more when, and I love the word curiosity. What it does is it gives you a sense of curiosity.
Right.
So if I'm going back to that primary emotion of fear, I can be more curious about it. Okay. It's that place of I can offer compassion. It's where creativity comes through. It's a different sense of relating to the stuff.
So when you've got trauma or anxiety or depression or whatever someone might be dealing with, good and bad, you first, and not to put kind of too fine a point on everything, but that's how my brain wants to go, is so first you realize this does not define me, this is not me, this is not who I am, these are just the things that are going on in my purview. They do make me feel a certain way. They do make me angry or, sad or uncontrollable rage or something, whatever it may be. And then, but those things still exist. So if I step back and I go, yep, those don't define Jeff, but I still have to deal with those. So then that type of work starts.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's okay. Right. So it's just, it's almost like who's looking at the stuff. So sometimes we're not able to even separate who's looking at it. It's just blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, that's all really true. And then at some point you have to look, who's the thing having the thought? Like what's behind the behind? Are you following?
Yeah.
Because, and then that kind of goes away. I don't know if I have these with me, but sometimes with kids, I have these masks and I have like Star Wars masks and I'll put up like Yoda. All right. And then I don't watch Star Wars, so I'm going to really jack this up. That's why I really wish I had the mask. But then I put up the ones where they wear the white thing.
The stormtroopers.
The stormtrooper mask. And then what's the furry guy?
Chewbacca,
yeah. Right? So here we go.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it goes. It's like there's the Yoda of who you are, but there's these other things kind of parading and walking through life, right? And those other things and maybe the emotions we kind of got to move through and say like, okay, here's that thing of who I am.
I think I'm just finding some confusion then on what do we do once we're there.
Yeah, I mean the thing is we want to more, and it's never, the work's never done in that
Sure.
way. We just want to be able to sit in that seat more and more and more.
Okay.
So that, which takes, to live an examined life means, and not everyone will choose to live an examined life, but that means how am I sitting in that seat of my true self? And what is it that wants to come through? What is this thing? And we were talking earlier, like later in life, I think Jung said like the first 40 years is just like collecting data. And then the next part of your life is where we start to go, okay, well, what is this thing and what wants to come through? And that's what's curious to me now, and why I think all along, if we're teaching our kiddos, if we're engaging in like, there's this thing of who you are. So I have an example.
Yeah.
One of the kids I was working with, I was working on a nonprofit, and this girl was known for her rage. I think she was a raging girl, and angry and in trouble in school all the time, and no one wanted to work with her. And I said, that's not who you are. That's an emotion. And some really shitty things have happened, and you're having a really normal response. But not the things that have happened to you are who you are, and not this rage. And she started to cry because she had been told that she was angry. That you're
a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You're a angry kid.
Yeah. Angry kid, hard to have in school. No one wants you. She was in foster care. So she lived with this identity of she was a bad kid. Oh, no. No. She's having a normal reaction. Not optimal, but normal reaction.
Right.
And none of it is who she is.
Can you put a name on who you are? Or is it just a thing? Is it just there? Is it something that our language doesn't have words for?
I love that. I think we work to have different, like lots of people have different preferences for words on it. There's this cool story of Ram Dass and Timothy Leary. And Timothy Leary had taken a little, maybe too much ketamine.
Okay.
And Ram Dass leaned in and said, "Who are you now?" And I just love that question. Because I don't think it's the word. I think it could eventually, what I want maybe for people to feel is that somatic sense of like, oh, like there I am. Here I am.
Yeah. And I think we live in a world, and we're so tied to labeling things and labeling, naming, and what is our affliction? If I am autistic, I am angry, I am this, and well, no, I am not. It was what you're saying, and what you're teaching is you are not. I am not. Even if I do suffer with this, you are not that. So I think it's hard for even me to go, okay, then what am I? How do I answer that? You can't.
I think that's the mystery.
Right.
And we keep pulling the numinous out of our experience of being human. Like, I don't know. And where does it go?
Keep pulling the what out?
The numinous, like
I need to know what that means.
Like the mystical, magical, unknown, that piece, the spiritual. We keep pulling it out because we want to be in that left side of our brain. We want to know, and then we can pathologize and insurance it and charge
people for it.
Yeah, and so and that's that's how a lot of things go.
Right.
And I work with a lot of kiddos who are neurodiverse, and there's that question for and I'm thinking of a couple in particular who say, no, this is really who I am. And I really get that. Like, the neurodiversity really does feed the experience of the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a neurodiversity. How is that also this thing of essence? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think we need to be like, it's this or that.
Right.
Like, call it that, and now you're.
Yeah, because what you're dealing with every day, whether it's your situation or your biology or your whatever it might be, your DNA, that plays a part into that, I would imagine, into who you are.
Of course, yeah.
But it's more of a description of who you are right now, as opposed to who you are at your base level.
Yeah.
If you boil it all down, before your body was here and after your body's gone, who are you? Like, I don't.
Yeah. What is this soul thing? What
Right.
is this thing that animates us?
The soul thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we're in that place, then we do have access to compassion, to the creativity, to connection.
Okay.
Right. We have access.
The things that hopefully bring people where? To a certain feeling, to a certain satisfaction, to like.
No, I don't think. I think it's more of we're able to sit with what it is to be alive.
Okay. Yeah, not overanalyze it like I'm trying to do right now.
It's not to overanalyze it, because we're talking a lot about the parts of the human condition that we don't care for, which is the trauma and the suffering and the anger and the sadness. And
that's the part we want to get rid of.
Right. And we can't get rid of it. Right. So it's part of being alive. So I would say it's more that when we practice and find access to our sense of self, then we're able to be with all of it, including our joy, including the things that like make us so excited and happy, and those big highs of love and wow. And then, yeah.
Before we go, how would you then coach somebody, or what's a way that you would coach somebody? How do we get there?
Yeah. Okay.
You spoke about it a little bit, and you and I worked on this a little bit before, but let's talk through what that looks like. Okay.
So if I'm working with someone one-on-one, I'd begin by first just saying, and I invite our listeners to do the same. If you could just try this way of thinking on. Yeah. Just try it on and
suspend whatever your skepticism is at the moment, and
just try it on, that there's this thing. And then, do you like being in nature? You said, yeah,
very much so, yeah.
Yeah. And if you're listening and you're like, I don't really explore nature, I don't go in nature, maybe there's a picture you saw. So if you close your eyes, not if you're driving, of course, but if you close your eyes and remember a time when you were in nature and you felt that sense of awe, or even oneness, or like, in that moment, Mother Nature was saying, you belong here. This is you too, perfect in timing, whole and complete. So important that you're here, because every breath you take, the plants and the flowers and the trees, they breathe it in and breathe it out with you. We're dependent upon each other. That's us. That's who we are. So
yeah, I love that. From the last time we did this, I had a little bit of a spike in my anxiety that took me back in time several months recently, and I decided to do some writing about it. And I caught myself trying to find that place again, the same as I did when I was in here before. And I actually went into some old photographs that I had, and I saved them into my note thing and brought them over. I found them like on my old Instagram or whatever. And I brought them over and I put them in there so that I could actually look at that place again.
Yeah.
Because it felt like I wasn't getting there by closing my eyes and remembering it again. You know what I mean? And I feel like there's something to be said too about, at least for me, when you can more than just visualize it, because it does help to get there in your head, but trick your brain into thinking you're there again by looking at those things. And it did help. I mean, obviously it didn't cure all my anxiety.
Well, it's not to cure anxiety. It's that you can come in and out of anxiety. It's that you can be compassionate and offer yourself compassion while you're having anxiety. And that the anxiety doesn't catch you off guard and take you, out of the building, right? Like, it's more of like, whoa, okay, here I am. And that anxiety is there too. Yeah. Here's another thing that works well. Do you, and I'm curious, when you're doing the nature thing, do you have a sense of, like, do you feel it in your body at all? Is there a body response a little? Yeah. Here's the other one I had said that sometimes really works well with people is if you take your hand on your heart, just like this, and then say your name out loud.
Jeff.
Yeah. Say, I'm Jeff.
I am Jeff.
And then say your age.
I am 40 years old.
I'm Jeff and I'm 40 years old.
I'm Jeff and I'm 40 years old. Eventually there's this place of like, and I got this. Like, I got me. I got me. Because what's anxiety, Right. That's that place of thinking of like, I don't got me. Nothing's got me. What I don't know what's going to happen next. Yeah, I feel like for me personally, and I'm going to be honest, it almost feels a little bit like escapism in a way, to kind of take a break, but jumping into that place in nature and remembering what that feels like, and that's where my brain goes. And I don't think that's what you're attempting for me.
It's also curious to me, like, why would that be a bad thing?
I don't.
Right?
Think it is.
I think it's really important that we're able to take a break and find an escape, and to remind ourselves, like, this isn't the only thing that's happening, because the brain will do that thing of tricking you to think this will be the only emotion you feel from now and forever.
Yeah.
This is never going away.
Yeah.
So
no, I don't think that it's a bad thing at all. I think there may be a little bit of a negative response to that knee jerk anyway, because it's sort of implied that if you're in the shit, you don't just run away from it. At least in my experience. And what it feels like to want to close your eyes or go into a different room and say, I'm not going to deal with this right now, starts to feel a little bit like you're running from the fight, even if you know that that's not ultimately what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Of course. That's you're not the first person to, and I would say your gender tends to
I
really
that.
butt against this compassion practice, or this place of like, hey, let's build a little space between what's happening. So that's absolutely a normal reaction. But I would ask that, or maybe you could get a little curious about trading in that wiring that's been given to you in our culture, men in particular, or maybe how you were raised, I don't know, but whatever has fed that story, I would ask that maybe you trade that in for something else. So
Yeah.
I would say that's an adaptive response,
For sure.
but not developmental.
Yeah. And I do think that in my experience, I can see that. I see that that's a learned almost and like unnecessary I guess stereotype or stigma or way you're supposed to deal with your problems and all that, and still get that little bit of a gut check when I go, but I need to not be here right now. I need to be dealing with this. Same as you know, when you just took me through the I'm Jeff and I'm 40, I could what instantly went through my head was I'm Jeff, I'm 40. I should have this, but I don't feel like I fucking do. You know what I mean? Both very, I think, powerful in their own right. But you're also going, my brain goes to, but what if I don't feel that?
Yeah.
What if it doesn't, what if it makes me feel a negative thing? So not that I need you to answer how that.
But I think it's a really valid thing that you're bringing up, because we do get a lot of to me, the biggest thing we get handed is take a deep breath. And I learned really quickly when working in impoverished communities, because there's such a high correlation between asthma and poverty, taking a deep breath is a ridiculous thing to start any, yoga, meditation, mindfulness practice with. It just doesn't work. So your feedback is really valid. And I also think it speaks to why communal experiences and conversation is so important when we're in this stuff, because this is a tool. But if it doesn't work, there's a couple things you can do. Don't use it. Right? That would be a big one. Don't use it.
Yeah.
But also have someone who's checking your biases and your stories and your conditioning, because the adaptive response or the learned behaviors that we have, they're unconscious. We don't even know that we're leading with that, right. And when I say I'm 48 and I got this, I don't mean I got my bills. I don't mean I got it all figured out. I mean, right now in this moment, I got my feet under me. I'm right here.
I'm alive.
Before he could face the challenges ahead, the storms, the waves, the unknown, he needed to find himself, to remember who he truly was at his core. And so with each pull of the oars, he began not only a journey across the sea, but also a journey inward.